Welcome to the Making of the Cape Verdean. My name is Jeannie Costa, and I am the producer. The Making of the Cape Verdean is a platform which enables me to highlight the rich history and culture of Cape Verdeans throughout the New England and New Bedford area. In today's program, I will be interviewing Mrs. Marlene Tavares and talking about her accomplishments and her contributions to the New Bedford community, which is immeasurable. So as I like to say, sit back, relax, and take some time to hear about Marlene Tavares' life and her extraordinary accomplishments and her contributions to the city of New Bedford. Thank you. Marlene, here we are. We're back again to wrap up and finalize this history about your life. So here we are, Marlene. We're back here.
I have Donald Gomes, president, second president, or either he's the president now, of United Front Development Corporation, and Mr. Jim Stockard, who was with us right from the beginning. He helped us to get started with all his research and everything, and glad to be here, Jean.
Okay, well, I'm so happy to be able to continue this because meeting with you and Donald, we talked about the importance of Jim's input. So, Donald, why don't you just kind of go over that a little bit, where we left off, and you were seeing the important role that Jim played in that, and then we'll have Jim come in and talk about some of that.
Well, I don't want to talk for Jim, but he worked for Justin Gray Associates, who was the designated architect, the architectural team assigned that was contracted to do the United Front. And Jim was, I guess his title at the time was the social planner, to do the, not the nitty gritty building kinds of stuff, but the things people don't see kinds of stuff, the human things, the human things of what families need to do, what families will face, and how we're going to do the project to fit the needs of the families. And they did a good job, obviously.
So was it kind of like an assessment?
No, it was more than an assessment. They actually, Jim and the actual architect was a gentleman named Wally Berger, who was in New York, by the way. I talked to his niece. She's doing his memoirs. Jim, you might be didn't know that. And like Wally's like 90-something years old. Anyway, to get back to the project, as I said, Wally was doing the actual building stuff, and Jim was doing the other kinds of things.
Okay, so how did you get to meet Jim? And then we're going to go over to Jim.
Well, as I said, you're Justin Gray Associates.
Okay.
Jim was working for Justin Gray Associates. He was one of the people on staff.
Okay.
I don't remember how many people. There was like Justin Gray, Jim Stockard, Wally Berger. What was his wife's name?
Ellen Feingold.
And Ellen Feingold. No, Phil Roderick was with MHFA at the time. And that's how we got Justin Gray.
Okay.
Was through I think through MHFA. We could say that now.
Okay, so I remember while I was talking to you, Marlene, that when you talked about the whole process and you were saying how difficult it was to get people to come on board. And Jim, how did you feel about meeting him and what his capabilities were or what you thought he could bring to the table?
Well, I just had the feeling, okay, this is a go. It was going to be a good team, a good working team, and I had the intuition and faith that with Justin Gray and you guys, we were going to really go somewhere, because to get Urban Renewal to turn the property over to us. That was a struggle. And then after we got there, we said, okay, now and then get MHFA to back us up, because MHFA wasn't too sure because minority, we had no money, and for them to just to loan us the money to get this thing started, they had to really think about it and really put everything together and say, okay, we're in New Bedford, MHFA, a lot of the guys at MHFA, those bankers, they were kind of like, okay, it's going to be a try.
Okay.
So I had
The
to
good
think.
news is, though, going back to MHFA, is Phil Roderick was a deputy director at MHFA, and he was kind of like adopted the concept of the United Front. And he became, I used to call him my godfather up at MHFA, because he looked after us. He made sure that whoever was assigned, you know, they're mortgage company. That's what essentially they are, as a bank. And he made sure whoever was assigned to look over our stuff did it with due diligence. So he was like our godfather.
Exactly
And
right.
yeah,
Exactly
so
right.
Okay,
yeah.
so this is a good segue into you, Jim. So happy to have you here.
My pleasure, Gina,
So
thank you.
I just want your take on when you heard about this project and how you felt about getting involved with it.
Well, Don is exactly right, I think. It was Justin and Ellen, our two senior partners, who were the key, and they somehow got introduced to Don and Marlene and the other members of the board. And I was, at that point, I was the youngest partner in the firm. Justin decided that I would be the one to come down and do the other kinds of things. To be candid, I think maybe I've never told Don and Marlene, I was a real rookie. I'd done lots of housing work of various kinds in my short career before that, but this was the first time I'd ever taken one all the way through, from the ideas of the residents. Roderick was a huge help. So Wally's job was to design the building, and he worked very, very closely with the board. Now, let me just say one thing, Jeannie. I have worked with dozens and dozens of community groups over the years, and thousands of apartments that I've helped to get online. In all that time, I have never worked with a group as good as the Front. They were an absolutely classic community-based organization with all the faith and trust of their community, plus all the roles within the board, right, that were necessary. There were people who were good sort of meeting runners. There were people who had political contacts. There were people who were strategists. There were people who knew the way to keep the organization together, and if it was in danger of having trouble. It was an absolutely spectacular community group, and it gives me enormous pleasure, but I'm also not surprised to know that literally 50 years later, the same people are still engaged. It doesn't surprise me a minute. That would not happen in any other community group. So back to the story. Sorry for the little. My job was to do everything about the development, and suggested some of those things. That was not the architecture. So we had to get the property from the redevelopment authority. We had to get the zoning changes. We had to find the financing. We had to find some I don't want to get too technical. We had to find some equity. It was the era when tax shelters were the kind of the way you got some cash to use for the finance. Because as you know, no bank will loan you 100% of the money you need to do a development. You need some cash. And
Especially being a minority.
well,
And
exactly.
please feel free to include whatever you want, because this is history.
Yeah.
So we want the details.
That would, for these tax shelters. It was a fancy way of getting cash into affordable housing in exchange for tax breaks for the people who gave you the cash. And every one of those organizations had a kind of a different policy about how much they would pay you and when they would pay you and so on and so forth. So that was another piece we had to do, was figure out which. I think we had 3 finally presentations to the board about, well, if you pick us, we'll give you this much money, and we'll give you some in year 1 and some in year 2, and et cetera, et cetera. So that was another part of my job, was to work through those things and help the board make that decision. And Marlene's exactly right. I don't know if MHA had ever dealt with an organization that was run by people of color.
Let me interrupt you just a minute. I can almost guarantee you that they had not.
I think that's right. I think that's right.
I can almost guarantee you they didn't know how to deal with
So
us.
this was historical. I mean, this was like,
They had no idea how to deal with us.
yeah.
They had no idea how to deal with us.
And I would take it a step further. Occasionally, not often, but occasionally, some of the leaders from the front would come up to Boston to talk to the people at MHFA. And I guarantee you, they were stunned at how much these folks understood the deal, understood the important principles, wouldn't cave in on things that maybe people would like to, you really don't want to, you don't have that, do you? And they say, yeah, we do. That's part of the deal. It's going to be that way.
Yeah.
So it was I think the members of the front, if you will, they I don't want to choose the right word here. They tutored MHFA. They opened the doors for other people of color in the future.
We taught them how to deal
confident.
with. We taught them how to deal with people of color.
That's
You're
right.
absolutely right.
That's right.
We're gonna-
Well, it's another one of our issues was finding a contractor. We had to find somebody to build this thing, and there were several people around who were interested in building it, and we finally settled on a local builder from here in New Bedford, and that was always a little tricky. One of the things we did was hired one of the board members, Deacon, to be a kind of clerk of the works.
Yeah.
When you say Lee, who are you referring to?
Deacon.
Deacon
Lloyd
was
Haddix.
a board
okay.
member.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it's often the case, an architect, one of the responsibilities of an architect for any piece of work they design is to periodically check in on how the construction's going, to make sure it's being done according to the drawings that they have done. But that's only typically once a week, once every 10 days, something like that. And a lot of things can go on between those visits. And so sometimes an architect will hire somebody called a clerk of the works. And that's somebody who's around every day to watch what's going on and to report to the architect, well, they were doing this today, and those studs in the wall seem a little far apart, and what should I check on those? And so one of the ways we could contribute a bit to the front was to say, we'll hire one of your board members to do that job, and that'll put some more money back into the community instead of all of it flowing out to us.
And then I was always on site because I planned to live here, and I was always behind Lloyd Deacon. I was always making sure he was here. I was also following him, making sure, because Lloyd was young and all that. And the other thing is, we made the decision that we wanted local. We wanted a local contractor. We want minority and everything, because we were all for building up New Bedford with a minority community.
Wasn't
And
Lloyd, didn't he have his degree in architecture?
After a while.
Later, yeah.
Later,
Okay.
he did. So we went on, and that's
Yep.
how we got Reliable Homes. Reliable Homes was the contractor, and we got him to work with the architect and
Right.
come in, and there
Right.
was a struggle. And we made sure Reliable Homes hired local
people.
to work for his company, and that's how Manny Pina got involved with Reliable Homes. And today, Manny Pina owns National Lumber.
Really? I didn't know
Yes.
that. I didn't know that. Wow, that's great. That's great.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, another really important element of this project that the front spearheaded and had such principles was just what Marlene's talking about building up the local community. It wasn't just about building 200 homes. It was building 200 homes, finding some jobs for people in New Bedford, building up the community, arranging, the reason this big community center sits here, and it's nicer now, but it's always been here, was that the front realized lots of residents here would need some support services of one kind, a little daycare.
That's
some
what was here
counseling.
originally.
Daycare was here originally.
We had a community room and the daycare center.
Well, which room is named after you, Marlene? Did you know that?
This room.
This room here?
This whole bill.
Oh,
This
this
whole
whole-
sec- this whole
okay.
section.
Did you
This
know
whole
that?
section.
I didn't know that. I'm not, it doesn't surprise me at all,
Yeah,
but I,
they named it, they had a ceremony named it
as
after
well
her.
they should.
Yeah, this section, this whole section.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So, okay, so now you get to the process that you got everybody in place. What were some of the other barriers? I know
City
there were-
Hall.
Okay.
Boy, we had to meet at City Hall and to convince them that we are building the property and the size of the land. Then we had some people that
Well-
didn't want us to have all the land, we have to split
Well,
it.
yeah, well,
Go
that's,
ahead, Tom.
yeah. what- There was this whole issue of how big this site is. It's 11 acres, I think.
Yes.
Yeah, I think so.
I think it's 11 acres,
Developed.
11 and a half acres, so they wanted to split this in half and give the United Front half the acreage and Wesley Associates the other half. And as it turned out, some people on the redevelopment, the board, not the staff, but the board members, said, gee, that don't make sense. We should either give it to one or the other, but not split it. It makes sense to have two different nonprofit organizations on one site. So
And what was Wesley Associates gonna do? And that I'll tell
they
you.
were going to build housing.
Because I'm the president
They're
of
going to
Wesley
build. They're
Associates
going to
now.
build housing. They were going to build.
Yeah,
They were going to build housing.
They were gonna
Yeah,
build
they-
housing. Did they ever build housing?
No.
Because that was before
No.
me.
They got
Okay.
townhouses.
No,
Townhouses.
they were. Yeah, I guess you could say that. That's what happened. Anyway,
Okay.
you got ahead of me a little bit when you started talking about the townhouses, but that's what happened. The board, members of the board,
At that
said it
time.
makes sense. We should do one or the other. We were kind of, the United Front at the time was kind of forceful, to put it mildly, and I might even say we were a little bit militant about what
Yeah.
we were doing here. And we got very militant about this land, and I
Had
might
they-
even
had
say
they-
I might even say possessed.
Had they been focusing or working at the same time simultaneously with you, I mean, not with you, but simultaneously, once this land was cleared, had they, because I know Howie Baptiste, who was the head of Urban Renewal, I know he was part of Wesley Associates as
Yeah.
well. So were they working at the same time that you were to try to develop this land, or did they come after?
They were working
I think
at opposite ends of where we were at. We were looking to do the whole piece. They
Okay.
were looking to. They still wanted to split it.
see, 'cause
And then, but to make a long story short, that whole thing was decided, the board decided to give the United Front the land, and we went on from there. Wally had this concept, which was ideal at the time. No kid had to cross the street. You could go from one corner to the other corner and not worry about getting hit by a car. And this whole issue, and at the time, that was the thing to do
Right.
at that time.
see, we were all thinking our mindset and everything was for the community. Wesley Associates was to make money. We were nonprofit, and they wanted it to make money. And when we got the plans and started, and after we dealt with City Hall, which was a struggle, City Hall to give us variance and the go-ahead, and had to deal with all the city councilors and
Who was the mayor at the time?
Eddie Harrington.
And who was
No, Markey.
was it
Markey after.
Markey.
No, Eddie Harrington.
Eddie Harrington first.
Eddie Harrington was back way in the beginning, but then it came George Rogers and then Markey.
Yeah. So we dealt with
Okay,
all
and
three.
So who was the head of planning at the time? The planning
Downtown,
department? Because you have to
downtown.
deal with them too,
Yeah.
right?
Yes, oh, I don't remember.
Ben
that
Baker.
Who?
I think it was Ben Baker.
Ben Baker. I'm just curious because for history, I just want
Yeah.
I think it was Ben Baker, I'm not
Interject.
sure, but no.
No.
No, it wasn't
No.
Ben Baker, it was the
No.
guy that committed suicide, that was his name.
Ken, no.
Yeah.
No,
I will-
no,
we'll
Kennedy came
Research
way
that,
after.
yeah.
So,
Anyway.
so the departments was, you had the mayor's office, you had city planning, and what other departments were?
You
involved?
have to, every department.
The major,
had to
the
do-
major
And city
issue,
councilors.
the major issue for us was the assessor's office,
Yeah.
was to get this tax deal in where you paid a set amount, what that,
Tax
121A?
21A.
121A program they had, you paid a certain amount of money.
They have to
When
pay
you say
taxes.
you, who?
The board,
The
The
builder,
property, yeah.
the
the
property.
United Front Homes, paid a certain amount of money for,
We have to
instead
pay
of
tax.
the assessment, what the project was assessed at.
It was a state law
Yeah.
that was developed, it started actually, it was first developed for the Prudential Center in Boston.
Yeah.
It was a way of giving developers a set amount of taxes that they could predict they would have to pay for all time, so that they didn't have to worry about taxes going up and down for their deals. And it was a way of supporting affordable housing. Again,
Exactly.
it started with Prudential Center, but then was applied across the state. And every developer of affordable housing wanted this deal, but you had to go talk to the local city officials
Local
to
assessors.
get it affirmed.
Well, why did they have to have the last word?
Because they do the assessing.
I
It's a
understand
tax-
that, they do the
it's a
assessment,
tax
but if
problem.
it became a rule or a law,
But they still had to, I'm sorry, Jimmy, you had to meet certain criteria.
okay.
And that was where Jim came in.
So the law basically said the city can do this if it wants to. Because it was the sort of law that if you were doing a luxury apartment building, you weren't eligible for it.
Right.
And so the town had to decide, is this eligible? And if it was eligible, then the town could grant this permission. And most towns did,
Yeah.
but some towns thought, yeah, we might squeeze something out of this and so on and so forth. So they had to do a little conversation. at
Exactly.
City Hall
Okay.
to get it approved.
Exactly.
And that leads me into my question about, we knew that urban renewal came and they, kind of, people had to relocate their lives, or they were disrupted. Why wouldn't the city and the city councils, and I don't know what ward this was, because they did some gerrymandering at the time, why wouldn't they be, embrace this idea of putting people back into their communities after they, what's the word I want, where they
Relocated.
Dislocated them.
dislocated,
Dislocated.
disenfranchised, whatever, yeah, okay. Why wouldn't they? What was their excuse about trying to, why wouldn't they just say, okay, you know what, we're gonna work with you, this is what the tax base is gonna be?
First of
Well,
all,
I think, excuse me, Dawn, before I forget, I think when urban renewal took over and destroyed, the city had plans in doing something else with this property.
That's the point I wanna hear.
Way to make money, put business, make a mall, whatever. They didn't have the plans for us to come in, or anybody to come in and build housing, because they had just got destroyed all the nice houses
But
that
when
was
urban
there.
renewal came in, didn't they say, okay, we're gonna level this land because of the structure, whatever the plan was, but wasn't it supposed to make it a better area without malls and stores? And I remember you guys fighting against that.
No, that's because Howie and the city, whoever was involved with the city, they had intentions of building this for a different thing away from housing. They wanted money making. That's what it was.
And that's when, and Jim, and I will say this because I was growing up at the same time doing different things, but we all were kind of involved in the community. And that's why when you say the tenaciousness of this group and to fight it
That's
and
the
have to
thing.
become, like you said, Donald, when you have to become like, militant, because we knew the history here. We knew the players.
Yeah.
And that was important that you stood your ground as a nonprofit.
I think the other part of that though is that HUD said no to that grand plan that they had for malls and stores and whatever they wanted to bring in here. I think HUD said, no, you need to redevelop that area make it community and build affordable housing. I think part of it was because I'm trying to think who the hell was president at the time. Well, anyway, that HUD at the time was kind of somewhat liberal in terms of what they wanted to do across the country. Yeah, I guess it was Johnson, yeah. And there was a lot of liberal stuff going on. I should say liberal stuff. The civil rights movement had been passed. Yeah, there was a lot of progressive stuff going on, and Johnson, for what it's worth, did a halfway decent job getting stuff done.
And I'll tell you something, and just to interject, because Lady Bird Johnson had a lot to do with that too. She was the one that was pushing behind him.
Yeah, well, exactly. But I think that's what happened. HUD just said, you got to do something else.
We were lucky at that point, Don, because the two people who were running the HUD area office, which is sort of the smallest version of the HUD, there's a HUD Central in Washington, there's a regional office, and there's a local area office called the area office. The two people who were running that, Marvin Siflinger and Eleanor White, were a really wonderful team and very progressive.
Exactly.
And they would have been the ones that would have shut down this idea, let's build a mall in
exactly.
Bedford. They would have said, wait, because they've been housing people all their professional lives. And so,
I remember that Siflinger.
Yeah, they were helpful. That's exactly right. That's exactly right.
Okay, so we're gonna start off with, you just state your name, your parents' name, and both parents and your grandparents if you know their name.
Mm-hmm. My name is Louis Gomes. I'm a junior, so my father's name was Louis Gomes. My mother was Antonia Ramus Gomes. They were both from Santa Clara. My grandparent on my mother's side was Anton. They used to call him Anton Yaya. I assume that was his mother's name. And I forget his wife's name. She died when I was very young. And on my father's side, Shalina Gomes was my grandmother, and her husband was Anton Gomes, and he also died relatively young. And they were all from Santa Clara.
And just for the reference, Santa Clara in Cape Verde.
In Cape Verde, yes.
Okay. So when did they come to this country?
My parents were born here, so they must have come early 20th century, probably, 19 something. I don't know exactly when they came.
Mm-hmm. So, and lived basically in the south end of New Bedford?
Yes, always in the south end of New Bedford, except for one brief point in time when my father got a job in Bridgewater, and lo and behold, that's where I was born, in Bridgewater. So I'm the only one that has a unique part of birth. So it's sort of coincidence that a lot of my life, education and whatnot, was spent in Bridgewater. And I actually went there one time and saw the room that I was born in, because it was a company house, and at that point my godfather was living there, so I got a chance to see him and also the house where I was born.
Where was this located in Bridgewater?
Bridgewater, it was the brickyard where a lot of people from New Bedford, not a lot, but some people from New Bedford got a job there. I guess it was the latest factory that was hiring people, so a lot of them went out there and worked. It was close to where the prison is, somewhere in that area. I think if you go by the highway, where the train, if you're on the train, I think you can see where the old brickyard was, see all the bricks and whatnot. So
that's an interesting piece of history of Cape Verdeans that I really wasn't aware of.
Yeah.
So when your parents were living in New Bedford, were you always on Acushnet Avenue, or were you other?
Oh no, we moved around. We had a large family, so we lived on School Street. I can remember. We started on Water Street, So I know a lot of people down on Water Street across from where the pilot house was. There was a 3-tenement there. The Gomettes were on one floor, we were on another floor. And then we moved up to Pleasant Street, and that's where we lived most of the time. Where Manny Rodriguez used to live, right behind where the Merchants Mariners Club was. So we lived there, and then we went to the West End, which was very fortunate because I got to know a lot of the people in the West End. And I was probably 12, 13, and then back down to the South End. We moved around a little bit.
So when you say across from the pilot house, so that was Howland Street.
Yeah.
On Howland Street.
There was a big 3-decker somewhere.
I know exactly, right towards the end.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
and we got to know, again, you get to know a lot of people, so that was really good. You know, the Nobrees and some of the other families that lived down there.
So when you say, you mentioned another family that lived downstairs, was
Gilmets?
John Gilmet and them?
No, this would be Harry Gilmet.
Yeah, Harry, that's what I meant.
Harry,
Harry
yeah.
Gilmet and his family,
Yeah.
right, because then they moved up near the cemetery.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
So during that time, where did you go to school at down in Bedford?
Went to they had a primary school and then an intermediate school. Primary school was Green School, and the intermediate was Allen F. Wood School, which was on 6th and Russell, and it's since been torn down, but
And then for your junior high,
Roosevelt,
Junior High, and then
I got tracked, like most people got tracked. And I was in one of the top divisions in junior high school, and nobody talked about college or anything like that. You had 3 choices: the general, the business, or the college. And they put me in the business, and I certainly didn't like that. I went to the high school, and I couldn't go to Voc because you had to be 14, and I was only 13. So as soon as I turned 14, I said, I'm out of here, and left.
so for some people that don't know what being tracked means, could you just briefly explain that?
Yeah, it's a way that the system used to put people on different courses of education. And most of the minority kids, including all the Cape Verdeans, ended up in the general course, which was the lowest, and you had no college. In other words, you're going to get a high school diploma, and that was about it. And then the business, I don't know where that was leading, and then the college was the top one. And all my colleagues in my classes, I assume, went into the college track, and because I was black or minority, I guess they assumed that college was not a possibility. So again, you know, they were doing that for ages, and that's the way it was.
Exactly, because as you say, even if you went into business class, we couldn't get those jobs.
Right. So
You didn't.
yeah.
So then from there, you went on to get how many degrees after that?
Well, got a bachelor's, a master's, and a doctorate.
And where did you go for your bachelor's?
Bridgewater State.
Water, and your master's,
Bridgewater State.
and then your doctorates.
Harvard University.
Okay, and you really excelled through the track. So I'm asking all of this because I think it's important to see your career path and how you ended up working with the board for United Front. And again, I think in the beginning it was called, what was it called before it started, United Front? Was it always the United Front?
Yes.
I don't remember. Okay. So how did you get involved with United Front?
Okay, it's again, as pointed out by the other interviewees, there was these mass meetings of black people after the assassination of Dr. King, and as an offshoot, the Development Corporation was formed. I assume it was Billy Campbell's idea. And I can remember the first couple of meetings. The meetings were always raucous and, lasting 4 hours of people shouting or pontificating or, emptying their soul or whatever they were doing. And so I was actually thrown out because I asked too many questions. Duke Cruz, I think, was one of the instigators. Throw him out, he'd ask too many questions. So I was out. And then I was asked to come back, I believe by Marlene, as I remember, and I was asked to come back. And at that point, I became president of the Development Corporation. And what had happened was that through the leadership of Mr. Carmo, we had bought these 4 houses with no money down and balloon mortgages so that, you would pay, the bank, the mortgage, next sum of money, and then at some point, everything came due, so your mortgage payments probably doubled or tripled. So the first order of business was to get rid of those 4 houses, because
And they were located in West End?
West End, all in the West End, 1 on Court Street, 2 on Kempton, 1 on Hillman Street. And just an aside, we wanted to house minority families, and Sleepy, Manny Azevedo points out that one of our renters was a family of 8 or 9. They were white, but they were also from Canada. So that's how ridiculous it was. We're trying to provide housing for our people, and we had no control over who was put into the housing because we had a contract with the housing authority. So anyway, we got rid of those 4 houses. That was the first order of business.
But the initial purpose of getting the housing was for the people that were going to be displaced?
No. This was
part of the project.
This was before. This was before the project even started, and there was some shoddy cosmetic construction in houses. And the one that sticks in my mind is that there was a fire escape put on the building, but in order to get to the fire escape, you had to jump over the kitchen sink to get out the window. I mean, it was. It was bizarre, the whole thing. Plus, we got jammed for lead paint, so we had to take out all the trim, and we tried different things. We went out to, what's his name, Dan George's house. He had some chemicals out there that would strip all the paint. We had to bring all the wood. It was just a mess.
But there was a lot of people involved, like when you say Dan George, who I knew so well, and some non-minorities that were given their time at that particular time.
So again, we had to get rid of those 4 houses.
Where did you get the financing for the houses? You got those?
No, Billy got these mortgages from the banks. I assumed the banks felt they were doing the right thing, but they weren't. And so there was no money down, and there's no way we could get out. No matter how much rent we collected, you couldn't pay for the houses. So
lesson learned.
Lesson learned. That's a good way to describe it. And then after that, we got involved with the development. Just as an aside, again, when you talked about the land not being available, or that Howie Baptiste wanted to share it with two groups rather than giving the land to us. What actually happened was that we had a meeting with Earl Carter down at whatever organization he was with. Earl, I believe at that point, was the president of Wesley Associates. And what happened was that we went to that meeting, and lo and behold, Sleepy went off and started saying there was corruption, Howie Baptiste was a crook, and he went all over Howie Baptiste and the Redevelopment Authority, and naturally, Earl had it on tape. So it was shared with the Redevelopment Authority over the next couple of days. So within a week or two, we got all the land. So again, it was having the right people do the right thing at the right time. And Sleepy, I would say, you can't prove that, but I think Sleepy's outburst certainly added to Howie Baptiste's desire to give up name us as the developer of the project.
And as Jim, as he mentioned in there, this was an experience for him because he saw how those outbursts and reactions caused, was very important to getting people to say, okay, let's go ahead and do this.
Yeah.
Kind of wrap up with the United Front. So I don't know if we asked about how the name came about. Do you remember that?
That was in the early days. I don't know.
So
It could have.
happened on the United Front.
Yeah, it could have been just the sentiment or the descriptive nature of it. We're all united and we're a front.
Right.
I'm sure there were united fronts around the country too, same time.
So what were your thoughts when we all started understanding how every time there was an incident in the West End, they always said it happened at the United Front?
Oh, that's the same stuff that everybody said, you know. It started right away. During the construction, a lot of the workers would damage windows, you know, crack windows and whatnot. And you go building by building in terms of getting your occupancy permit. So what they would do is take windows from one building, you know, make one building complete and put all the broken windows in one building. And the Standard Times wrote a story saying that United Front is being vandalized in the community and all that stuff. We went down and we met with them. We told them what was happening. We had the contractor with us. They said, no, they're not going to change it. You know, they're not going to put a retraction. So that was the beginning right there that, you know, it was painted as, you know, something.
A troubled area.
Troubled area.
Yeah.
They banged us on density. You know, you look at the buildings downtown. What's the density of those? I mean, so, but again, when black people get into a building, it's density. When white people get in, it's a nice condo, it's stylish living or whatever you have. Density doesn't become a factor. So again, it was different, and certainly some of it was racially tinged, and some of it was that who are these people doing, you know, this, and how did they get this done? You know, so it came with the territory, and fortunately, everybody was strong. And again, when Jim said about the militancy, we certainly had some of those in our group.
Mm-hmm. And I can even remember a conversation that we had at the NAACP, speaking with the community and asking the police to stop referring to every time something happens on the corner, it's United Front. So they're saying it happened on such and such corner.
Yeah.
So was that the emphasis for changing the name to Lewis Temple?
That was part of it. I think it was a new beginning. We had redeveloped the whole place and refinanced it and had new partners. So it was a chance to kind of hopefully put that away. And but again, we still keep our name on the, you know, we didn't change our name. You know, we're still, you know, part owners and whatnot. But the financing of the whole thing, again, very complex. And can it happen again? I think it can. But as with the casinos, they only let it happen once, and that's it. So it would be very, very difficult.
Yeah. And again, and I will continue to say this, that what you folks did was just extraordinary because they just haven't had anything since.
Yeah.
I mean, that's it.
Yeah.
So,
Just a thing for future reference. Again, they didn't want us to have any money, and they did everything in their sling of arrows to make sure that we ended up with nothing, and to the point where they again wanted us out out of the deal after everything was up. They wanted to make us people who just gave advice and a scholarship, you know. And I mean, people, again, some of the lawyers that we had look at the documents that were sent to us, I mean, they were incredulous. I mean, you know, they just want to move you out of the deal, period.
It's all, I think most of it is based on greed.
Yeah, greed, that's it. Greed. I was surprised to hear that Jim said that he was a rookie. And I appreciate that he was a rookie because he was open to any ideas. The way it got started in terms of how we were going to put this thing together was that as part of a normal development, you get the developers in. So Jim would bring down these people in fancy three-piece suits, you know, real sixes, and we would interview them. And what they were basically saying is they would put together the deal and they would walk off with $500,000. So, you know, after hearing all that, and again, we had a number of people who were very skeptical about everything. So, so at some point, Jim said, you know, we should look at you guys doing it. So I believe it was his idea, and again, the pieces fell in place. Jim could do a lot of the consulting. They had an architect on site. We could interview the construction people, and the finance company, Mass Finance Agency, which was basically the banker. You had mentioned, somebody had mentioned Phil Roderick, but he was again in our corner. So all those pieces fell together. And then with Jim's help and guidance, we went on and became the developers. And I think that's the unique things. Many people get involved in nonprofits, but they end up not being intricately involved. They don't get all the benefits. And with the benefits comes some money, and with money, somebody's going to kick your butt because they don't think that black people should have money. And, you know, if it was a white developer, they could just run off, take the money and run off. Non-profit or poor people, they're not going to let you do that.
Always suspect.
Yeah.
Always like, we're not capable.
Yep.
And as Jim said, that he was amazed to know that the same board, the people that are still around here, are absolutely hands-on involved.
Yeah.
Still controlling it.
Let me tell you a little bit about the board. As Jim sort of pointed out, there were a lot of skills and a lot of different personalities. You had Vera Hunt and Wilhelmina Clark, who were from the West End and really looked out for doing the best for the people in the West End. Then you had John Cruz and Sleepy Azevedo, who were sort of semi-communists, is a way to put it, or on the social end. And they provided a lot of the outrage, the militancy, and keeping everybody in their place. So if we're interviewing somebody, you can expect John Cruz or Sleepy, you know, to really drill into them and make sure they were being honest with us.
Wasn't Eddie Travers?
Yeah, Eddie was there.
Okay.
Eddie Travers was training to be a lawyer, and in his quiet way, he provided legal assistance to us. And then you had three people that are still living. You had Deacon Haddix, who knew construction and ended up to be the clerk of works. You had Sam Graham, who worked at the State Street Bank and also was a businessman, so he had that end covered. And then you had Gracia Hillman, who worked in state government, and she almost single-handedly got the daycare up and running and did all the work in terms of the applications and the grants and all that. And then you had Donald, which you spoke about, with the government, local government, and
Marlene.
Eddie Travers, we spoke about, and then Marlene, who was the eyes and ears of the whole process. So it was like an orchestra, and I was the conductor, just kind of pointing out who could do what and kind of keep things moving along. So I think Jim was right on in saying that that somehow, I don't think we did it by plan, but that everything came together. And again, when you do housing, you realize that, like everything else, you follow the money. And a lot of people made money, and fortunately we came out with a little bit of money, but we had to fight tooth and nail for everything that we got. I was just thinking the other day, we had 5 lawyers. I mean, and that's why we got into a lot of trouble with the state agency. Not trouble, but I mean, we would tell them no, and we would ask why, because they wanted to raise the rent. Everybody wants to raise the rent all the time. When you say, why you want to raise the rent? You know, show us the figures. And no one liked that. We had Tony Cruz, we had Ray Lance, Ray Berry, Dick Moses, and finally Phil Beauregard. Phil was very instrumental in getting our partners off our backs. So again,
When you say your partners, who are you referring to?
National Housing Partners, or AMCO, they became AMCO later. Again, they all wanted to take over, and they all wanted to put us out of the picture. And so every time they came down, we had to fight them and fight them and fight them. And it was just ongoing.
What gave them the idea that they could just take over after it was your group that brought all this together?
Well, I think that they, they were looking out for their interests. One of the things they could do without us is, again, select the management, raise the rents, do all that stuff. And then eventually they could actually sell the whole thing. And if they had no group and, telling them no, then fine, they could do that. One of the things that we negotiated early on was that we would have 100% control over management. And nobody liked that. Nobody liked that. And because again, that involved everything. And our partners would always want their firm to manage the development. We told them no,
One of the things that Jim brought up that he said that happened, that the experience he had with this group, he's never seen anything like it before in his life. He said, but they used this basically as a template for across the country.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, he said that many organizations, because there's never been one like yours that stayed with that ownership and being a part of it, that they use that as, like I said, a template for other people so they can say it can be done.
Yes. Again, it wasn't easy, and you get your head beat in. For example, just on that 100%, it's kind of complex, but to sort of simplify it, we owed the contractor some money because we were responsible for overruns. And we would do some money from our partners so that we could pay the contractor. They got together with MHFA, the banks, and said, now we can get these people. So they put us in a box because we had lost an arbitration. We went to arbitration too, which was a losing proposition. There was an architect, a contractor, and a business person on the arbitration panel. We stood no chance. So we went and argued. And so we owed this money to the contractor, but we needed the money from our partners. And so what happened was that they called us up to MHFA, and they said, we talked to your partners and we want you to give up some of the things that you got. And we said no. And we ended up giving up 50% of the management, which meant nothing because we still had control. So we ended up giving up 50% of the management. They gave us the money, and then we paid the contractor. But again, you know, they were all working against us. And again, because the leadership at MHFA had changed. So,
And this was historical because there was never anything like this done in this
No.
ever before.
no, and somebody should, again, write it up. But anyway, that's,
This is a beginning. This is a
yeah.
start.
And again, Marlene, I know that's the focus of your program. Marlene was the eyes and ears, so she was on the development from day one until she moved in and whatnot. And she eventually became president after I became the treasurer. One thing I want to say about Marlene was when not when I first met her, but we were all working at On Board. I was an administrator, and she and Belford Pena were the contact workers. And for some unknown reason, I got a memo from the school department that said they're going to close the Green School. They're going to offer, the kids would, they could either join the pupil transfer program, the busing program, or they could go to Donaghy and have an innovative pre-vocational program, not a pre-college program, pre-vocational program. They hadn't told the parents. And so once I got that, I got together with Belford and Marlene. They went out and they contacted all the parents and had started to have meetings. And what happened was that they were left with a school, kids, all the teachers had transferred, and nothing. And again, the school department was ashamed and embarrassed, as they should have been, and they were willing to give up some things. So at that point, with all the parents getting involved, and some of the administrators from the local colleges, Swain and UMass Dartmouth, and some other parents, all got together and they started to plan. They had a role in selecting the teachers. They had a role in developing the curriculum and what it was going to be. And that was a very bold experiment in that time. And white parents transferred in to the school. And so it was pretty much through Marlene and Belford, and to a lesser degree my influence, that whole thing was turned around. And then Marlene didn't mention it. Probably she doesn't remember it, but that was, in my mind, very influential. And unfortunately, the one thing they didn't get was a choice of a leader, a principal at the school. And that's you have to have that in order to be long-term effective. So they didn't get that. But the other two things, that they got the curriculum and the teachers, turned out to be pretty good. I guess eventually it was folded into the Gomes School, so that was all lost. But again, it was a bold experiment and something that would have not have happened without the influence and the impact of those contact workers and on board.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Right, and I'm sure Marlene will appreciate hearing that.
Yeah, we got involved with the development. Just as an aside, again, when you talked about the land not being available, or that Howie Baptiste wants to share it with two groups rather than giving the land to us. What actually happened was that we had a meeting with Earl Carter down at whatever organization he was with. Earl, I believe at that point, was the president of Wesley Associates. And what happened was that we went to that meeting, and lo and behold, Sleepy went off and started saying there was corruption, Howie Baptiste was a crook, and he went all over Howie Baptiste and the Redevelopment Authority, and naturally, Earl had it on tape. So it was shared with the Redevelopment Authority over the next couple of days. So within a week or two, we got all the land. So again, it was having the right people do the right thing at the right time. And Sleepy, I would say, you can't prove that, but I think Sleepy's outburst certainly added to Howie Baptiste's desire to give up the name us as the developer of the project.
And as Jim, as he mentioned in there, this was an experience for him because he saw how those outbursts and reactions caused or was very important to getting people to say, okay, let's go ahead and do this.
Yeah.
Kind of wrap up with the United Front. So I don't know if we asked about how the name came about. Do you remember that?
That was in the early days. I don't know.
So
It could have.
happened on the United Front.
Yeah, it could have been just the sentiment or the descriptive nature of it. We're all united and we're a front.
Right.
I'm sure there were united fronts around the country too, same time.
So what were your thoughts when we all started understanding how every time there was an incident in the West End, they always said it happened at the United Front?
Oh, that's the same stuff that everybody said, you know. It started right away. During the construction, a lot of the workers would damage windows, you know, crack windows and whatnot. And you go building by building in terms of getting your occupancy permit. So what they would do is take windows from one building, you know, make one building complete and put all the broken windows in one building. And the Standard Times wrote a story saying that United Front is being vandalized in the community and all that stuff. We went down and we met with them. We told them what was happening. We had the contractor with us. They said, no, they're not going to change it. You know, they're not going to put a retraction. So that was the beginning right there that, you know, it was painted as, you know, something.
A troubled area.
Troubled area.
Yeah.
They banged us on density. You know, you look at the buildings downtown. What's the density of those? I mean, so, but again, when black people get into a building, it's density. When white people get in, it's a nice condo, it's stylish living or whatever you have. Density doesn't become a factor. So again, it was different, and certainly some of it had was racially tinged, and some of it was that who are these people doing, you know, this, and how did they get this done, you know? So it came with the territory, and fortunately, everybody was strong. And again, when Jim said about the militancy, we certainly had some of those in our group.
Mm-hmm. And I can even remember a conversation that we had at the NAACP, speaking with the community and asking the police to stop referring to every time something happens on the corner, it's United Front. They were saying it happened on such and such corner.
Yeah.
So was that the emphasis for changing the name to Lewis Temple?
That was part of it. I think it was a new beginning. We had redeveloped the whole place and refinanced it and had new partners. So it was a chance to kind of hopefully put that away. And but again, we still keep our name on the, you know, we didn't change our name. You know, we're still, you know, part owners and whatnot. But the financing of the whole thing, again, very complex. And can it happen again? I think it can. But as with the casinos, they only let it happen once, and that's it. So it would be very, very difficult.
Yeah. And again, and I will continue to say this, that what you folks did was just extraordinary, because They just haven't had anything since.
Yeah.
I mean, that's it.
Yeah.
So,
Just a thing for future reference. Again, they didn't want us to have any money, and they did everything in their sling of arrows to make sure that we ended up with nothing, and to the point where they again wanted us out of the deal after everything was up. They wanted to make us people who just gave advice and a scholarship, you know, and I mean, people, again, some of the lawyers that we had look at the documents that were sent to us, I mean, they were incredulous. I mean, you know, they just want to move you out of the deal, period.
it is all, I think most of it is based on greed.
Yeah, greed, that's it, greed.
So, well, I want to thank you for
Yeah.
taking this time, Lou.
Thank you.
And I want to take that direction on. I think there's so much history in the city, especially what happened during those years,
Yeah.
especially within our community,
Yeah.
community of color. So much was done, but it always gets put on the last page
Yeah.
of the news
Yeah,
and all the accomplishments. And I still think people are shocked today to know that this has continued.
Yeah.
How many years has it been? Because it started like in the late 60s or
no, it's been over 40 years, going on
40
50.
years.
Going on 50, and again, we're still in there fighting.
Right.
We have some resources, and we had some ups and downs, but through it all, again, I don't recall anybody just leaving. You know, everybody hung in there. Many of them died, and some have moved away, but they're all the ones who moved away are still available. And,
Okay.
okay, thank you.
You're very welcome.
Um,
So, well, I want to thank you for
Yep.
taking this time, Lou.
thank you.
My thing was to build for the people to have beautiful homes and decent and well taken care of, because my training was to get in and see how the landlords weren't really doing what they should do, charging rent and not taking care of the housing that the people were living in. And I built all of that, and it makes me feel very sensitive and think to build for the better of the people. And when we started with United Front, I worked closely with, what's his name, the architect,
Wally Berger.
Wally Berger, to design the house, the proper apartments and everything, the 2-bedroom, the 3-bedroom, and they were, Wally Berger, and then there was like, what is this woman talking about? 5-bedroom units and 6-bedroom units and all that. And we went, and this is my life. I am so proud of it, and my daughter and my grandchildren have something to be proud of, and that was my motivation for them. That's what I'm leaving, for them to have the history of our city of New Bedford, Mass. I'm very emotional now. So.
No, that's okay, Molly. And thank you so much for that, because you got me emotional over here. But that is your legacy. And that was why it was so important for us to do this, for us to film this. And Jim, I want to thank you so much for being here. And Donald, for you, and all three of you, Molly, for your hard work. And we thank you for taking this time out to share this history, because it is so valuable and important. So with that, we're going to go outside and take a couple of deep breaths here, because you have, like I said, got me over here crying too. But thank you. So we'll.
There's so much more I could say.
Hey, this is over, I'm telling you what. Oh, he's still on?
He's shutting it off. You got it off? Okay, we're gonna go and take a couple of, do a couple of things out here, and we can take it, or do you wanna bring the whole tripod?
I don't think so, no, I think it's still on, is it on?
Okay,
Okay.
So,
So Don, Marlene, if you're in touch with Lou Gomes, would you tell him hello for me? He's Lou. Hello, man. It's great to know that you're still around and hanging in with these people. And I wish you the very best. You and Don and Marlene are my real heroes. So hello.
And Donald Gomes can give you his email.
Oh, good. That'd be great. I'd like to be in touch.
Communicate with him then.
That's a good idea, Marlene.
Was there any other board members that you knew?
No, Don said that only Eddie Travers was from the original board. And Eddie, how are you? It's good to talk to you too. I should keep my eyes out. I might, literally, the Cambridge-Somerville line runs right through my house. We pay 87% of taxes to Cambridge.
Here's our unofficial clerk of the works. Oh, here's the board too.
Oh yeah.
And what award is that?
Preservation.
Oh no, that's not the one.
That's a different one.
Yeah, that's a different one. Where the hell is that thing?
I don't know, it's in that room, in that closet like that.
Oh, yeah. This
Okay.
is from the city event. When we started doing the renovation.
In fact, I learned how to do construction, I just want to be.
Which is okay.
I think that's right. I think this is a better. Today we understand things a little differently than we did. And I think having the streets back in is a better idea.
As I said it all the time, when we did that with those streets, it was ideal at the time.
Yep.
It was timely.
Right.
As time went on, of course, things changed. People changed.
You get smarter.
Yeah, and it was necessary.
We learned.
You mentioned,
Exactly.
you mentioned something about John Exafaris.
John Exafaris, we talked to John Exafaris about being the attorney, and he had a bunch of young guys working for him. John was partners with Ron Pena and Ray Ferry and all these young guys. And so they assigned, I should say, Ray Lance to be our attorney, to represent their office with us. And Ray worked on a contingency basis. He came to every meeting once we went into this process. Ray came to every meeting and worked contingent on us getting funded.
The front didn't have a real big bank account.
No.
So they had to rely on people like Ray and like us to work until there was real money.
Even just in
for the mortgage.
Now, our meetings used to be where the little store is on the corner. That used to be our building.
We owned that building.
We owned that building.
We started with
And that's where we used to have our meetings.
Exactly right.
We started as landlords buying 4 houses. that one over there, and there was a house, you know where the peaceful garden is over there? We had a house there, and one down over here in Court, is it Court and Chancery?
Yes.
Yeah. And the other, and another one on Hillman Street. We were landlords. So we had to, what we wound up doing is selling those properties. Hey, we wound up selling those properties, and when we started this project.
So Ellen ran this organization, which owns about 2,000 homes for older people. She's now retired from that as well, but she's still active around. She's still on the board of an organization I'm on the board of up there, Chapel. So we see Ellen there once in a while. And Bill Perkins has gone back to Wisconsin.
She's my age, I think.
Ellen, yeah, it might be. She's a little older than I am, so she might be 80 or something like that now.
Yeah, I'm 87.
No, you're not. Come on. I'd love to be as good shape as you're in when I'm 87.
Thank you.
Yeah, Ellen's about 79, 78.
Something like that, yeah.
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 You don't have to hand it to them. We just live in a couple of 1 second, Mom. We're gonna cut. Remember, always keep the mic up.
Okay.
Okay. Both. Okay.
Tell me, Marlene, how are you getting along with POA? This is a really great organization that I think, from what I know about them, they listen to the community like we always have and like you always insisted. Are they working well with you?
Oh, beautiful. We're partners.
Yeah.
We are still partners in the corporation and everything, and I have no problem here. I'm so glad that we did get in with them.
Yeah.
It was the best decision to keep it going. We're keeping it going, still a United Front, but still poor with United Front. Yeah.
Yeah, I know those people a little bit, and when I heard that you and they were partners, I thought this is the right kind of group for the front, because they'll really listen to you and they'll understand what your principles are and your priorities are, and they'll honor those. I thought Don seemed a lot of guys.
Oh yeah, they've been great. We've had from the beginning when we started this redevelopment, right, the United Front Homes, which became Temple Land, and they wanted to change the name for whatever reason. It made sense at the time, so we did that. But they've been great to work with. I mean, it's like any organizations. You have little spats, but you deal with it. You know.
Absolutely.
We dealt with spats and fixed it. Whatever had to be taken care of was taken care of, and say, hey, let's do it this way. Okay.
Yeah, there were times in our relationship when you guys were saying, Jim, we need to go a little faster, please.
Yeah.
And I would say, oh yeah, I need to go a little faster.
They've been good.
So yeah,
They've
but
been
that's
great
good.
to work
That's
with.
good.
Yeah.
That's good.
It's like a family. I'm taking it all in stride as a family. You do with the family and get things done, and it's a team.
Yeah. Very nicely said.
We've got about 8 minutes left, so Joe, I'm gonna have you pan it around and show us some of the buildings, Joe.
68 minutes.
Oh, I thought you said 8 minutes. Okay, so just turn around here, and then Marlene, you guys can talk a little bit about, how the changes, just go.
Oh, there's major changes here. We went from 200 units to 168. We put the streets back in. Fortunately, we kept the,
Streets are all closed. And then we opened them up with POA. We decided to just make the change and open them up, and here we go. I'm proud of those. Yeah.
Good job. And the color scheme, everything's changed about the development. It's got, it came up with the times. It changed and came with the time, where the developments used to have just one kind of decor, one color scheme.
Right.
Now, everybody's using this color scheme, different colors with different buildings, and the size of the buildings and everything.
I remember going with Roger Brown to Boston, and I saw things being built in Boston with different colors. I came back. I says, Roger, let's do our development.
That's great.
Different colors.
Yeah.
So I picked all the colors and got it all going. And I was working at the time.
Wow,
My own
wow.
job. I worked at Shaw's.
Yeah.
I worked at the courthouse and babysit with my grandchildren in Boston. And I was still doing all of
Still doing
this.
all this.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, I think that's a wrap, as they say. So, yeah, this was good. What we'll do, because we took some photos before. Remember when we first started? We took some photos. So what I think we'll do is maybe take some close-ups inside the hallway there. And any other documents